Join our high-level closing panel with two iconic African leaders as they reflect on what it will take to achieve a healthy society for people across the globe, offering innovative insights and solutions aimed at increasing women's leadership. Welcome to our first closing plenary at the SDG Action Zone. We've seen so many deeply important stories, conversations, and causes highlighted throughout today's sessions around the theme of people, and they have truly run the gamut. So, to knit together all we've learned today so that we can turn it into SDG action tomorrow and beyond, the global network of female politicians known as Women Political Leaders, the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf Presidential Center for Women in Development, and the SDG Action Zone wanted to set aside a time for reflection, to reflect on the power of communities, the power of people, and the power of gender parity to drive progress toward a truly healthy society. It ought to go without saying, but I'll say it nevertheless. An inclusive, people-centered future is the one and only way to accelerate the Sustainable Development Goals and mobilize global action. While the COVID-19 pandemic has presented the world with seemingly insurmountable challenges, it's up to us, together, to deliver solutions for a sustainable future. And no solution is possible without the meaningful inclusion of women across all dimensions, which makes this a pivotal moment to create a permanent shift in how we think about women in positions of leadership, in both politics and beyond. For us to have any hope of achieving a healthy society, for us to actually build a better future, we cannot leave the full potential of half the world's population unrealized. And we won't. That's why I'm delighted to welcome our two incredibly special speakers today to this closing conversation of today's SDG Action Zone. After spending 12 years in exile, our first guest, Her Excellency Madam President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, became the first ever woman elected president in Africa. A winner of the Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of her efforts to bring women into the peacekeeping process, she was president of Liberia from 2016 to 2017 and is the founder of the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf Presidential Center for Women and Development. And joining President Sirleaf and us today from Namibia is the Honorable Deputy Minister of Information, Communication, and Technology, Emma Theofelus. Appointed in March of 2020 when she was just 23 years old, Minister Theofelus not only became one of the youngest cabinet ministers in all of Africa, she joined the front lines against the COVID-19 pandemic, leading Namibia's public communication on preventive steps against the virus. Welcome, welcome, Madam President and Minister Theofelus.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you today. And Madam President, I would love to start with you. A recent study from the University of Dublin shows that countries with women in positions of leadership actually suffered 6 times fewer deaths from COVID-19 than countries with governments led by men. So why have women leaders been so successful, relatively speaking, in combating this pandemic? And what qualities do you think women leaders demonstrate that make them such good ambassadors for a healthy society and a truly equitable future?
Oh, well, thank you, Nadria, for asking that. Let me start off by saying, since this is the SDG's action zone, that the 17 goals established by the SDGs, it's well in harmony with the 20 goals of Africa 2063. And those really converge when you deal with those affecting women, 5 and 16 for the SDGs, and a similar one calling for the protection of human rights and democracy, in which gender equality falls. Now to your question. If we notice, as you've reported, the fact that in all those countries that have been able to address COVID-19 with effectiveness have been mostly women. I may even say all women have been in the forefront of being able to do that. And that's because women bring a stronger commitment and effort to whatever they do, particularly as regards life, livelihoods, welfare. Women also are the ones that promote peace. And obviously, if there's peace, there might be less harm to women, because we know during COVID-19, it was the women who suffered disproportionately because they were at home. And in many cases, they become subjected to violence. Women are the ones that promote education, equality, justice, equal opportunity for people in society. And they bring to their task great compassion, dedication, courage. Women are also bold in action. And in many cases, even if circumstances and their boldness would mean that they would become unpopular, they take those action because it's in the best interest of society. It promotes women participation. It helps women to have a stronger life plan. And women express empathy all the time. We can count on them to ensure that they feel for others, and they can bridge those gaps with those who are suffering, those who have pain. I don't think there's any reason to doubt why women were the ones that were so effective and so successful in combating COVID-19.
So the answer to the question is obvious from your perspective.
Absolutely.
And I had to stop myself from cheering. In this virtual environment, we want to make sure we're not, stepping on each other's audio and everything else, but all the words you use, boldness, empathy, all of these things are so intuitive, and yet we don't always underscore them. And we sometimes want to dim our light a little bit and say, well, mostly women have been successful, but I think it's exactly right to underscore it is okay to dare to say, all of the places that we've seen the greatest progress in this pandemic environment are led by women. That's a wonderful statement to make, and we should lean into it. And I'm glad that you stressed that. And speaking of women leaders in this pandemic, Minister Theofelus, you started your job literally as this pandemic was ravaging the entire world. And I think the entire world was realizing just how bad it was going to be. Can you reflect on what it was like to be in that role and to not just react to the pandemic, but to be learning your job at that moment in time, at that moment in history even?
Yes, thank you so much, Nadira, for the question. And I can only agree with Her Excellency Sirleaf for all the statements she made about women leadership. My experience in this pandemic, and starting exactly at the time when I was appointed, was a roller coaster. I realized very quickly that it's very difficult to make tough decisions on the impact of lives and livelihoods of your citizens and constituents. So really it was tough, but also a very quick learning curve to jump right into the work of action and to ensure that I'm able to bring my part and my skills and my outlook to the work that needed to be done. And there was no other way but to ensure that work was needed to be done.
So it's amazing to be having a conversation with someone who was one person who was the first women leader on the entire continent of Africa, and one person who is one of Africa's youngest cabinet ministers right now in a country where 60% of the population is under 25. So could you both sort of about women leadership in the particular context that you're in and how we energize young women in particular to come into the fold, not just from an activism perspective, but especially from a pure leadership perspective in government, as you both are?
I think we got lost a little bit there.
Oh, sorry, did we drop the connection? It's a brave new world, guys. So what I was asking, if you can both hear me now, yes?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Okay.
What I was asking is having you both in this moment that we're in, where we have one leader who was the first woman elected on the continent of Africa in a presidential role, and one who is one of Africa's youngest cabinet ministers now, and in a continent where 60% of the population is under 25. How do we actually take that energy that you both have obviously harnessed and bring it to the next generation? How do we engage more young women in leadership and engage them not just in activist leadership, but in political leadership, as you both have demonstrated so beautifully?
But let me say that as a leader who's already advanced, we reach out to people like Emma. In my Center for Women in Development, we bring young women like Emma and have them interact, exchange experiences with women who have advanced and excelled in leadership. Because Emma represents the future. We have to set the example for them. We have to be able to share experiences with them, and we have a platform in which young women like Emma will have an opportunity to have discussions, to interact with somebody like Ngozi or President Joyce Banda and all of those. In that way, I think we help to prepare them for the leadership that they will have to assume in the future. As a matter of fact, she's already well on her leadership journey. In her position, she's already reached a certain level. And what we want to do is to see her achieve more influence in the position she's in so she can make a difference. We want to see her advance beyond being a minister according to whatever is her joining and her chosen path of joining, whether she remains, in a executive service as a cabinet minister in her country, whether she wants to achieve leadership in other areas in the society. We'd like to see some of them advance to being parliamentarians, to head business entities, And so, Emma, I hope that by our lives and experience, we motivate you so that you can be able to claim the leadership that you want and that you rightfully deserve.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I can only reflect now on what you have said, that since I was appointed, I'm very grateful to see that it is mostly older political leaders and business leaders alike that are women that reached out to me and gave me tips and gave me advice and are willing to guide me on this path that I am on now. And it's really encouraging. And I can only say the opportunity for other young women like myself is to constantly bring them along on this journey, but also to ensure that they have the confidence and the boldness that Madam President was talking about earlier, to take challenges as they come, to break down barriers as they come, and to lean on other women, older women, to able to hold their hand and guide them through uncharted waters that they have themselves gone through. So I can only reflect and say, it's really warming to hear that from you, Your Excellency, and I trust that will be the action from every other woman in all forms of leadership, business, political, and otherwise, in creating spaces for more young women to come along.
It's so clear that there's a proliferation of opportunity almost in this moment, which is a fascinating thing to say in the environment that we're in, but it's clearly true. And I have to tell you that it's amazing to even be in this conversation, to see this sort of passing of this generational mantle, and to understand how much it means. And that is wonderful. But what about the challenges? What do you think the biggest challenges are right now to
do we have a
women more and say again? Sorry.
Sorry,
No,
Nadira, we lost you.
I thought I thought it was a pause, that something had gone wrong with the internet again, but carry on.
Of course, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on the challenges. What are the challenges to getting more women involved in leadership and moving the ball forward as we know they can and will?
First, I think we need to challenge the stereotype. You know, women are those regarded that take care of the children, take care of the home. Women leaders traditionally, teachers and nurses, you know, but that's changing. It's changing when you see young people in parliaments, in Congress. We see young women who are now ministers. Even in the business sector, we see women who are now heading large corporate bodies. It's changing, but still the lingering disadvantages of stereotyping are still there. And we have to continue to challenge it. We have to continue to make sure that we promote and argue and advance and demand changes where appropriate in laws, in constitutions, in policies, using good examples in some places. I always say the example of Rwanda that has 64% women representation in parliament. We want to know how they did it. What did they change? What did they do? Can we make it applicable in other countries to see? We have to continue to talk about promoting equity, promoting justice, equal opportunity for women. And women themselves have to claim leadership. They cannot be timid to be able to demand their rights. They must be able, in a peaceful way, but a demanding way, to continue to stand out in society and say, time for change. And if there's any time more appropriate for change, is now. COVID-19 has just laid bare all the inequities of the world globally. And there is a call for action, a call for change, and we must take advantage of it. We also know one of the big areas of restriction are political parties. Women are frozen out of political party leadership. And again, we must find a way to address that. For many of our countries that are poor, where girls have to do menial tasks like accompanying their mothers to markets or to the farm, we must insist on girls' education. Girls must be allowed, we must get parity for girls in education, just as we seek parity for women in leadership. And so for us, it's a continuing battle of collaboration, coordination, support, networking among ourselves, using examples of those who have excelled, challenging where necessary, particularly violence to women. In so many places, which has been exacerbated by COVID-19. We must continue to push for changes. And the progress we have, we need to also recognize that progress, or simply say that the progress is not enough. We want to make sure we have equity in all areas of society's endeavors.
Thank you so much. Minister Theofelus?
Yes, if I can just add to say that I think the challenge with women getting into leadership is one that is also faced by young people, and that's the element of trust. Structures not being able to trust the leadership of women, but yet they can trust women to be the cornerstone of society and be able to look after the children who are the future generation of the countries and societies, but cannot trust them with leadership and their judgment at times, and which some of these stereotypes Her Excellency was talking about. So I think it needs to start with a conversation of trust and using the excelling examples that exist today to demonstrate that women have led and they have led well, and they can lead like any other leader that has led before in that particular society or community. So I think it needs to start from there to be able to then give the confidence to the girl child and young women to feel emboldened enough to be able to take up that space and see themselves in those positions. I think those examples of women that have led and led well need to be amplified and intentionally so that it's almost like a protest to say that it's ignorant to have some of these stereotypes that still exist, considering the vast examples of women leadership that continues to thrive on the continent and in the world.
And there are so many incredible examples, exactly like you said, and so many great stories to tell. And maybe that's a place for me to ask you guys a question that may be more personal. Is there a story or a moment looking back on your decision to enter into leadership that you can share with us, a moment or an anecdote of when you decided to get into this this fight, so to speak, and to take on that mantle of leadership that might encourage those folks watching out in the world to follow in your footsteps? What was your epiphany in that regard to take this first step?
Well, I know for me, it's really been a progressive movement into leadership. In high school, I spoke out. I was recognized as somebody that was called a tomboy because I did things like, climb trees and played balls and all of that. And so, while that may be in those days be looked at as not a woman's thing to do, not a little girl's thing to do, but I think that was my own way of expressing myself in saying, I can do what I want to do, even though I'm a girl, So maybe that was the moment of doing those things that girls don't usually do that set me apart, or made me feel that I could do anything. And maybe that carried with me, throughout my leadership journey.
And it actually goes back exactly to what you were saying about girls' education, because we have these conversations in adulthood, but it starts so young. And the thought of you as a young tomboy laying the foundation for this incredible career and life that you've had is actually deeply inspiring for me. And so I can only imagine what it's like for all of our SDG Action Zone viewers to hear that and think of you in a tree as a child beginning on this leadership journey. That warms my heart, literally. And what about you, Minister Theofelus?
Well, Nadira, I think there's a power in finding your voice and being able to speak out when you don't think anything is right, or you don't think you agree with something. And I think that was for me a defining moment, because the moment I was able to stand up and voice my opinion, regardless of someone who's older than me or in a bigger authority than me opposing it, and me standing my ground, my peers and those around me saw that as I guess confidence and bravery to be able to trust me with tasks and leadership positions to lead them. And I think for me that was a defining moment, because as people started nominating me and electing me throughout primary school and high school and even university, it sort of spoke to me to say that they probably see something in me in an effort to see me lead. So that really encouraged me to be able to continuously be my own voice, but also be the voice of those that might not have a seat at the table oftentimes. People that look like me, people of my age, people of my gender. And that really put a sense of responsibility to continuously voice out. And I think with that voicing out created more confidence, and that confidence put me in rooms and places where I can continuously advocate for things that I believed in. So I think at 13 years old, when I discovered the power of law as a tool that can create social change, I think that's where really, I think, the confidence came and the reality to say that I might be able to lead and that I can lead well.
I love this balance of the self and the community, because that to me is so emblematic of what women bring to this conversation and to every conversation. So it's wonderful to see it reflected here. I wonder, as we close out, if I could ask you each to give us your vision moving forward. What's coming up next, particularly when it comes to women leadership, and what would make you really cheer to see in this next decade of action?
We're headed for Beijing plus 25. There's a report that has been prepared for this. There will be women meetings on this. I expect that when that global meeting takes place and that report is tabled for discussion, we want to see concrete actions. It's been a long time since Beijing, and I say now what we need is to have not just women going to Beijing to discuss the progress and the continuing challenges, but we must now get men leaders to commit to real action, to real changes in laws, changes in policies. We must use the example of some countries like the Scandinavian countries, where everyone is a person, equal in every way, to every right. And when we can get all of our countries, the leaderships and authorities in all our countries, to be able to commit to that, and then we can see the changes that take place that will accelerate the pace of headed toward gender parity.
Minister Theofelus?
Well, I think Your Excellency has said it already well, but I think from a more individualistic perspective, I would say individuals should start recognizing their bias and the stereotypes they have on women, and that continue to unlearn harmful sentiments that hinder the progress of women and young women particularly, and be willing to learn new progressive ways on how to better support young women and their leadership. Then I think most importantly after that is to pass on that lesson after unlearning all these harmful sentiments and learning new progressive ones. And to the young women truly around the world, on the African continent, continue to lead wherever you are, at the front of the line, in the middle, all the way at the back, in your home, in your school, in your community. Continue to lead and make your mark. Let us be those young women. Let us be them. Let us guide them. Let us support them. And let us continuously be there for them.
Wonderful.
That is a one.
That is a powerful
Exactly.
message to your colleague, young women in Africa and the world. And I want to say one thing, Emma. You made one point that will always remain with me because it's so important in leadership. You said more than once, self-confidence. That's what you exhibited in moving. That's an important value for leadership. Thank you for being so strong in that.
Thank you, Excellency.
I just cannot think of a better way to end this day. and talking about people and talking about solutions and talking about the SDGs than this conversation that we've just had. And in our final minute, which is just 1 minute, can I ask you each to just give us one rallying cry as you speak to those women that you want to move forward and to take this mantle like you've said? What's the slogan? What can they hear from you, directly from you, to be energized to service?
At any obstacle, you can win.
You can win. And Minister?
In the words of Miss Universe Zosie, young women and women continue taking up space.
Good.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And that's a wrap from the SDG Action Zone. Thank you, Minister Theofelus, and thank you, Madam President. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.